Well, good morning again. My name is still Matt. I'm still happy to be here with you guys this morning. I wanted to kind of jump into our message this morning just by saying thank you guys so much for being here, for celebrating Christmas with us, for starting your Christmas season right here at South Mountain Community Church. And I wanted to ask you along the lines of Christmas, I have a quick question for you. And you don't have to shout it out. You can if you want. I'm not going to stop you, but you don't have to shout it out. But I want to know, what is your favorite Christmas song? I want you to be thinking about that song. For me, my favorite Christmas song is a song that I realized this morning on my drive in I didn't actually know the name of before today. I have been saying for years that my favorite song is Walking in a Winter Wonderland, which is not the title of that song, and I just found that out this morning. It's actually just Winter Wonderland. So, fun fact, you got something already this morning, like 20 seconds into this, if you didn't know that, like me. Now, the thing is, that personally happens to be my favorite song. However, there's one that this year in particular has come up far more often than that. A song that I've heard many more times, a song that I've thought about a whole lot more this year, and that is a song called All I Want for Christmas Is My Two Front Teeth. And there's a specific reason for that. There's a reason that this is a song that I've been thinking about, and it's because of my son who is just up here, and I did clarify with him before I used him as a sermon illustration this morning, just in case you were wondering. He said it was fine. So, I wanted to show you guys a picture. This is my son Jeremiah. He turned 7 a little less than 2 weeks ago. And there's a reason, if you couldn't tell from that photo, that the song All I Want for Christmas Is My Two Front Teeth has been in my mind a good bit this year. And that's because over the past month or so, he's lost both of his front two teeth. And so I thought it'd be fun to talk about the song with him, bring it up with him. And it turns out that all he wants for Christmas is not his two front teeth. He doesn't really care very much at all. He wants Nintendo Switch games, he wants Pokemon cards. The two front teeth thing is kind of a back burner ordeal for him at the moment, but it is there, I guess, somewhere along the lines. Now, the reason I bring this up, obviously it's a goofy song, obviously it's something silly, and that's kind of the intention behind it. But the heart of what the author of the song, what the original artist who wrote this song is trying to get to with this song is that there is something that would make them happy at Christmas time. There's one thing, and it's only that one thing. It doesn't matter about all of the other pieces of Christmas, the other gifts under the tree, because all I want for Christmas is my two front teeth. And while the song might be kind of comical in and of itself, I think it actually does speak to something that many of us do understand on some level. We might not want our two front teeth, but we probably do want something around the Christmas time. We do want something in our lives that we hope is going to fulfill us in some way, that there's going to be a gift or an amount of money or a job or a different circumstance in our lives that is going to find a way to fulfill us in a way that we desire on a deep and internal level. Now, the song, like I said, the author of this song might just want to get their front teeth, and I think that that's pretty much the only thing they're talking about, is that they feel that they're lacking something, and theirs is a little more physical than some of the things that maybe we feel like we're lacking, but I think it's something that's true for each and every one of us in our own lives. And so I think far too often in my life, I've thought this way. I've thought that maybe if I can find that one thing that I've been waiting for, it's going to fulfill me. And the issue is, time after time after time in my own life, the things that I've been waiting for, that I expect to fulfill me, the job, the work, the money, the thing that I'm waiting to come through in my life doesn't actually fulfill me. It still leaves me empty. Maybe it feels good for a minute, but it's gone after just a few moments, and that doesn't seem to last. And so I want us to dig into this question this morning. If we're still left wanting, why is that? What's the reason that we still desire something on a deeper level? And to answer this question, we've been going through a series over the past few weeks called Happy Christmas, where we've been exploring this concept of looking at this question of what makes us happy, both biblically and theologically, and building a framework around finding a way to answer that question on Sunday morning for us. And so, to me, I tend to think whenever I have a question and I go open up my Bible and I go searching for it, I want to know, what did Jesus say about this particular topic? And sometimes that's substantially easier than it is with other questions. And The question of what can I do to be happy, what can I do to find happiness in my life might not seem like a question that Jesus answers directly on the forefront of his ministry, and yet, interestingly, it really is. It's a question that he answers in great detail over and over and over again, but specifically, one of the times that we're going to be looking at this morning is through this sermon that's one of Jesus' most famous, most important sermons called the Sermon on the Mount. This is a time where Jesus enters into talking to a large crowd of people by actually answering this exact question. What does it look like to find happiness? How can I find that happiness in my life? And that's exactly what he's talking about here. So this morning, I want to spend some time introducing you to the very beginning of this sermon. Maybe for some of you, you've heard it before. Maybe for some of you, this is the very first time, and that is perfectly fine. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. If this is your first time and this is new for you, we can all learn together. What we're going to be talking about today is a thing that historically through church history has been called the Beatitudes, which is a fancy word for statements that are going to be starting this same way. They're all going to start with the phrase, "Blessed are the ... That's the phrase that we're going to be looking at this morning. It's the phrase that we're going to be digging into a little bit. And I've always loved the poetic nature of how Jesus starts the Beatitudes. He jumps into this by starting every single line with that same phrase. Blessed are the ones who, blessed is he who, ... And so we're going to dig into this a little bit, but I want us to understand something, because if you're anything like me, you're probably thinking, blessed are the ... is not happy are the ... So what are you trying to get at, Pastor Matt? What's the conversation you're trying to get at here? Because happy and blessed are two very different things in our world. I could say that I'm happy about things, but I often wouldn't equate that to being blessed, and vice versa. They tend to have different descriptions, different definitions today. But today, I want to tell you something. This comes from a Greek word that actually most directly translated translates as happy. We talked about this last week, and we kind of dug into what the meaning of this word is, but I want us to look at this a little bit closer, because up until the 17th century, this word was to be translated as blessed or as happy. It was something that could be translated either way. They were interchangeable synonyms. It didn't really matter. And so in the King James Version of the Bible, which was created right around that same time period, they chose to say, blessed are the ... And there's nothing wrong with that translation in any way, shape, or form. There's nothing evil or wrong or mistranslated about that phrase. But as etymology tends to do, the phrase has changed its meaning just a tad over the past few years, the past few hundred years to be exact. And so the word blessed could very easily be replaced by the word happy and have exactly the same meaning, because the word that's changed its meaning actually isn't happy. The word that has changed its meaning is blessed. It means something slightly different to us in our culture today. And so it leaves us with the question, how can I be happy? And I want us to jump into this the way that Jesus answers the question together this morning. This is Matthew 5, 1 through 3. It's in the NIV translation. If you're following along, you can read along with us. And it says this: Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and he sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Now, if we're going to take that word blessed and we're going to swap it for happy, as we've clarified that we can do this morning, then we're going to see something different here. We're going to see happy are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, the question that I would be left with is, why are the poor in spirit happy? That seems like a very strange way to start things off. Jesus is kind of jumping directly into the weeds of this conversation. He's saying, blessed, happy are the poor in spirit. What does this mean for us? And so I want us to kind of dig into this just a little bit. But before we answer, I want us to understand what Jesus is saying here, because this is absolutely Jesus' commentary on the lie that many of us believe. We believe in order to be happy, quite often, we need a certain amount of money. We need a certain amount of things. We live in Utah. I could look around, just drive through St. George, and you're going to see garage after garage after garage full of toys, full of things. It's what we like to do, specifically here in this place, very much so. And so we just think, if I could only have a few more dollars, if I could only have a few more toys, then I would truly be happy. And what Jesus is saying is no, we've got to flip that on its head. But he's also not saying it's the poor financially who are blessed, who are happy. It's not the people who have found the perfect work-life balance and the perfect amount of money and listened to the right podcast and found the exact people who are going to teach them how to find happiness. It's not what Jesus is saying. What Jesus is saying is blessed are the poor in spirit. Happy are those who are poor in spirit. Happiness is not a matter of wealth. Instead, he chooses to say that those who are poor in spirit are happy, meaning happy are those who live with a daily dependence on God. Happy are those who live with a daily dependence on God. It doesn't have to do with the specifics of the financial situation. It has to do with the heart. That's why he chooses this phrase to use in here and continues to dig into it. Those who recognize spiritual poverty, those of us who realize that we are broken and we have absolutely nothing to offer of our own merit, are those who are happy. Those of us who realize, hey, there is nothing I can physically do to make God love me any more than he does, and there is nothing I can physically do to make God love me any less than he already does, because the reality is that I am a loved child of God who is broken and is in need of a Savior. And so when we see that we have this dependence on God, we can have a better understanding of what it means to truly be poor in spirit. The second that we begin to believe that everything lays on our shoulders, which by the way is a lie that both religious institutions and irreligious humanist culture are going to try to tell you, that everything just relies on you, whether it's doing the right things, stacking up the right good deeds, or whether it's just talking to the right people, getting into the right crowd, getting to earn the right things in your life so you can seek others' approval. Either way, both of these are going to leave us high and dry. They're going to leave us broken. And the Beatitudes Jesus starts to use to give us answers to why. Where do we find happiness in the midst of a broken world? Matthew 5:4, he continues on. He says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Happy are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Now, this is where things begin to get a little more complicated, because again, happy and mourning don't seem to go together on the surface very well whatsoever. Whether it's blessed or happy, we're probably going to struggle with reading through this section off the bat, because how can I be happy if I'm in mourning? It doesn't seem to make sense. And so Jesus, we've got to kind of ask, what do you mean by this particular statement? What does it mean to be happy in my mourning? And this is where, like I said, it begins to feel like a puzzle that we've got to sort out. We've got to put together. We've got to understand what he's saying. And until you take the time with it and you see the way in which Jesus actually means this and the way in which it's connected to the rest of the Beatitudes, we're going to be confused. But what it means is happy are those who grieve their losses in this life. Happy are those who grieve their losses in this life, because grief is a choice. Every single person around this room is going to experience loss. We all have experienced it in various different ways. We're going to unfortunately continue to experience it. There's no amount of doing good things that's going to make your life blessed in such a way that you no longer experience hardships. It just doesn't work that way. But what we do with the hardships is a choice that we have. We can choose to either grieve, or we can choose to shove it all down, not acknowledge it, and push past the tragedy that we see in our lives and just not feel it. And what happens when we do this is that when we lose loved ones, when jobs go south, when divorce happens, when relationships fall apart, when people pass away, we are left completely broken and empty, and we force it down on the inside, and we create an emotionally numb, stunted, muted version of ourselves. And that is not who God calls us to be. And so we have to be able to work through these things. We have to be able to figure out how to not bypass the process of grief and how to dig into this. And what Jesus is saying here is, happy are those who choose to mourn. Because those of you who grieve will be comforted in your grief by the co-sufferer that we have in Christ. Those of you who choose to mourn, who choose to grieve, will find our happiness once more on the other side of that grief. So as paradoxical as it may sound, it makes absolute sense. Happy are those who mourn, is what Jesus is saying. So then he continues. He says this, Matthew 5:5, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now, happy are the meek is another kind of strange concept for us because growing up, I'll tell you guys, I wanted to be two things. My two earliest memories on what I wanted to be when I grew up was a professional wrestler or the vocalist in a hardcore metal band. And neither of those things directly relate to meekness in any way, shape, or form. I grew up with much more of an understanding of meekness equals weakness than I did meekness being anything good or amounting to anything positive in life. I don't know that anybody intentionally instilled that in me, but it was certainly the picture that I got, that if you wanted to be successful, you had to be strong and manly and slam people through tables on pay-per-view television. I don't know. It wasn't the true picture, and it's not what Jesus is talking about. Now, I also want to clarify something. This idea of meekness doesn't just mean quiet and weak. Jesus puts it this way: happy are those who understand that all of life is a gift. Happy are those who understand that all of life is a gift. Because what produces meekness that Jesus is talking about? It's when you're not concerned about yourself. It's not when you think less of yourself. It's not when you beat yourself up. Meekness has nothing to do with not understanding our value. If we have a proper evaluation system for understanding our value in Christ, we are not going to become people who are broken and held back in life by this particular piece, because the reality is we don't have to put ourselves at the center of all of these questions. We can actually put Christ at the center. But what we need to do is understand, just like we talked about a moment ago, that this life is a gift through Christ to be able to share with others. We have to be able to understand that happy are those who understand that all of life is a gift, because all of life truly is. And when we understand life through the lens of what we deserve, we begin to demand more. We begin to be unsatisfied. We begin to put ourselves at the center. But when we understand that all we truly deserve is brokenness, then we can understand that the gift that Christ has given us is so much more beautiful than we could ever pass on, so much more beautiful than we could ever fully understand, and we have to go share it with those around us. This is the type of thought that produces happiness. He says these are the people who will inherit the earth, not that they will earn it, but that they will receive it as the gift, and that is it. Matthew 5:6 says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." Happy are those who hunger and thirst. This one's a little difficult for us too. You know, this week, it's Christmas season. We're a little busy around here. If you hadn't noticed, there's a lot of new faces, and I'm so glad to see all of you. But I had a day on Wednesday through Thursday where I realized, and my wife can attest to this, I realized at the end of the day on Wednesday that I hadn't eaten anything in like 24 hours. And I was like, oh, that's probably not good. And I was really hungry. I went to go eat some food. And then I was like, I don't even want to turn the microwave on. I'm too tired to turn the microwave on to warm up food. I'm just going to go to bed. And then I woke up and Thursday went along, and I went through most of the day without eating food on Thursday as well. And when I tell you I was irritable, I wasn't myself, I wasn't thinking clearly, that is just the logical conclusion. So when we hear, blessed are those who hunger and thirst, we're like, I'm not really sure about that, because like being hungry is not fun. Being thirsty is undebatably worse. So let's not do that. But what he's saying here is, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Now, what we're seeing here is that this could easily be stated as, happy are those who are committed to honoring God through everything that we do, through every thought that we have. When we're hungry, when we're thirsty, when we feel the physical elements of these things. We're going to talk about it in a series in January where we're going to be going through how our bodies relate to the gospel, how our bodies relate to theology. And I want us to think about this, because when we are able to put ourselves in a spot where we're happy because we're committed to honoring God, it is exactly the same as hungering for food or thirsting for water, that we have to be able to do this because we just love God that much. And so when you think back to the decision that you've made, the decisions that you've made in your life that have left you unsatisfied, and we've all had times in our life where this has happened, where you feel discontent, you feel like you've been left empty. When you remember the decisions that have left you with regret, how many of those times were you faced with doing the wrong thing and doing the God-honoring thing, and you chose to do the wrong thing? For me, that happens more often than I care to admit. The biggest regrets of our lives usually come from those particular those situations. We don't end up regretting it when it's hard and when it's difficult, when it costs us something, but we keep our integrity, and that honors God. We don't usually end up regretting that side of things. That's satisfying, and that sense of satisfaction produces happiness in the way that Jesus is laying it out for us. Just as much as the regret, doing the fast thing, doing the thing that feeds our hunger immediately, easily feeds the regret that we'll feel. It robs us of that happiness. Matthew 5:7, he continues on, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Happy are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." I think this one's pretty easy to understand. We're finally getting to the spot where we're like, okay, happy, that makes sense in that one. Happy are merciful people, I get it. I can put that one together. It's pretty intuitive. And if you flip it around, we're going to get an answer that says, unhappy are those who are unmerciful. Unhappy are the vengeful. Unhappy are those who seek violence. Now, I realize that for some of us, probably our favorite Christmas movie, there's going to be some of us in the room whose favorite Christmas movie is Die Hard. And that's okay. There's nothing, I knew it. I didn't even have to question. I knew David was going to say that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a fine movie. But with that being said, it's usually something that interests us because it fulfills that desire for vengeance that we feel. Things need to be set right. They need to be taken care of. And there's justice and there's vengeance. And justice is good. Justice is God-honoring. Justice comes from our Creator. Vengeance, wanting someone to pay for the wrongs that they've done, simply does not. Jesus says, turn the other cheek, not go watch Die Hard and get fired up. So, when we're waiting to get paid back for the things that have happened to us, it also steals us of our happiness. And so happy are the relationally generous, is what Jesus is saying. Happy are the relationally generous. I think that for many of us, instead of being people who choose to give others what they deserve, we can choose to give others a grace that they don't deserve because it's the grace that's been showed to us. And I promise you, though it's difficult, though it's challenging at times, that is the way that leads us to a much more full and happy life. Jesus continues on, Matthew 5:8, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." Now this is interesting because purity is a loaded word nowadays. I don't know if you're aware of this. For some of you, immediately I said purity and you cringed a little bit. For some of you, you didn't because you have no idea what I'm talking about. But I grew up in a time where purity culture was a very real thing. And it was an unhealthy way of talking about sex, talking about our bodies, talking about the way that we were supposed to handle ourselves. And so when I hear the word purity, it's unfortunately intrinsically linked in my mind to something that just makes me go, oh, no, I don't want to listen to it, put it away, I don't want to hear it. The issue is, it never had anything to do with the specifics of how we do this, and it had everything to do with the way that it was portrayed. It never had anything to do with sex being held into the right place for marriage. If you grew up in purity culture, you know what I'm talking about. That's fine, that's correct, that's absolutely good. The issue was how it was packaged to me. The issue was how it was given to me. And so whether you're someone who carries a lot of guilt and shame, or even doesn't want to hear the word purity, or you're someone who has no issue with it, culturally speaking, I understand purity is not something that most of us find our happiness in. It's not something that you're expecting to find happiness inside of. But Jesus is saying the opposite of this. Happy are those who pursue purity in every aspect of their lives. Happy are those who pursue purity in every aspect of their lives. Because the biblical word for heart wasn't just a matter of emotions. It included emotions, absolutely, but it also extends into the minds. It extends into the actions. It extends into the things that we do with our head, our heart, and our hands. And so when we see this laid out, we see that these thoughts, these aspects of our lives are places where we need to lean into this. Now, the trouble here is that moral purity often feels like it leaves us on the outside of the party. Like everyone else is doing something else, and we're out here missing out. We're just kind of stuck in this unfun area while everyone else is having a good, fun party on the inside. And yet, the reality is, Jesus is saying happiness is not found in there. It's found on the outside. It's found in the purity, because in the midst of moral purity lives a God who loves us, a God who has grace for us. And the ability to see and understand what God is doing in your life and in the world around you and in that relationship, in that, there is joy. I want to continue going through these. Matthew 5:9 says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God." Happy are the peacemakers. This one, again, is a fairly easy one for us to understand. It kind of goes directly into that one about vengeance. It kind of brings everything full circle for us. Jesus is saying, happy are those who make peace in relationships. They're called the children of God because when we respond to others in this way, we're treating others the way that God has treated us. I think this is a hugely important one for us to dive into as we come up on the Christmas season, because maybe your family is perfect and never gets into arguments. Maybe you never have any disagreements and your Christmas table is going to be incredibly peaceful and there's not going to be anything going wrong. But I also know for a lot of people that's not the case. And so blessed are those who make peace in their relationships. Happy are those who make peace in their relationships. When we see this, we see the prophet Isaiah looking forward, prophesying about Jesus' coming, gives us this key earlier on in Isaiah 9:6. He says, "For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." You see, Jesus was born so that he could take on our humanity and die in our place. He took it upon himself to make peace with the world. And we don't deserve it in any way, shape, or form. But when we do the same to others, we're acting as Jesus acted, and we're able to see the happiness that he's laid out for us. Matthew 5:10, he continues on with the blessed are, the happy are. He says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." You see, we will experience losses in this life. We will experience difficulties. As I said, often in our culture, blessing and the idea of being blessed has been misconstrued and miscalculated and abused in a way that makes us believe that if we're blessed, we're not going to be stressed. If we're blessed, we're going to be kept protected and we're not going to experience difficulties in life. And that is simply contrary to the gospel. It's just not true. What we do understand is that blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. Happy are those who suffer for choosing righteousness, is what Jesus is saying. Happy are you who suffers for choosing righteousness. Because again and again, the suffering and the difficulty is going to happen one way or the other. But the way that we choose to go through that is something that we have a choice in. You can choose to suffer for making decisions that honor God, for pursuing purity, for being relationally generous, for all of these things, or you can choose to suffer for making decisions that are dishonoring to God, that erode the relationships in our lives, that make everything else feel difficult and fall apart. And that's it. That's the Beatitudes. It's the beginning of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. It's the beginning of what he's jumping into here in this massive, grand story that he gets to tell to many people while he's standing, speaking to all of them. And yet what he's saying here, what I think is being said, is so important for us. It's something we looked at just a few months ago when we went through the Kingdom is Like series. But he's saying, we know it's set this way because the first and the last of what's being said here is exactly the same. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. They're bookends. What he's saying here is that happiness is the result of the choices we make. This is our key idea this morning. Happiness is the result of the choices we make. Or as we said last week, your happiness is the byproduct of your devotion to a happy God. It's not a matter of whether or not you get your 2 front teeth back at Christmas, or you get the games that you were looking for, you get the toys that you were looking for, whether everything you could have hoped was actually going to come to fruition. It has nothing to do with the physical side of our lives, and it has everything to do with making decisions that either produce happiness or decisions that erode the happiness that's in our lives. We'll choose one or we'll choose the other. And by the way that we live each and every day of our lives, we'll see how these things play out. So I want to encourage you as you go forward into this week, I think that it's sometimes challenging, it's sometimes difficult to see where it is that we can make these choices. And it's sometimes tempting to go home and start working on these things just so we can become happy. But I want to encourage you, what Jesus is laying out here in the Beatitudes has so little to do with just us and so much to do with his kingdom. It's why he starts with a statement about the kingdom of heaven and why he ends with a statement about the kingdom of heaven. What he's saying here is that we will be known as a people who are happy and share that with the world. Not in a fake way, not in a put a smile on your face when you're going through difficult things way, not in a way that we have to convince ourselves that we've been blessed so that we can convince you that we've been blessed, but in a way that we truly understand that we don't deserve the grace that we've been given. We don't deserve the place that we have, and yet it's been given to us. So thank you guys so much. I want to encourage you to go throughout your week, find ways this week where you can lean into this, where you can find joy this Christmas season because of a baby who came to earth 2,000 years ago to give the most beautiful, precious, joy-filled, happiness-filled gift that the world has ever known. If you could bow your heads and pray with me, that would be wonderful. Dear Lord, God, we love you so much. We thank you for everything you've given us. God, I thank you so much for being here with us today, for allowing us to continue to worship you. God, I ask that as we go forward from this place, that we would be a people who go into our community, who go into Washington County, who go into Utah, and share your happiness, your love with the world around us. God, we thank you for giving us this way that we can see, that we can find happiness that's not based upon our circumstance or upon our standing, but upon the title that you've given us as your children. God, we love you so much, and we thank you. I pray that you would be here, that you would be praised, you would be honored, you would be lifted high by everything that we say, everything we sing, and everything we do here today. In Jesus' name, amen.